Good afternoon, folks. This is Robert Chappell, Executive Editor of Madison365, with your daily update for January 7th. It is a kind of a wild day in the news. I do news for a living, so I'm always kind of tuned in to things. But this is one of those days, one of those rare days, where I just kind of have CNN on all day long because it feels like something might happen at any second. What I want to talk about today is the real possibility that the president might be removed from office. And I realize we're a local outlet, but I think it's worth talking this through because this affects all of us. And I think that it's a little difficult to wrap your head around. So I just want to kind of talk through what might happen in the next couple of days, what it might mean for us, where our representatives stand. And so here's what we know right now. If you have any questions on any of this or any thoughts on it, if you just want to even just vent about it, drop it in the comments right there and we'll get to them. But we'll talk through this and then we'll get to the COVID data, which is, the COVID data today, not great, but not as bad as it has been. So, we'll keep that in mind. So first of all, why are people talking about removing the president? And who's talking about it? Many top Democrats, including Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, Chuck Schumer, our own congressman here in southern Wisconsin, Mark Pocan, has called for the president's removal or resignation. Former Chief of Staff John Kelly told CNN earlier today that if he were still a member of the cabinet, that he would vote to remove the president. Former ambassador, former national security advisor John Bolton said the only reason not to remove the president is because there's only 2 weeks left anyway, and he thinks an attempt to remove the president would make things worse. That's the only reason John Bolton said not to do it. So there's 2 ways that this could happen, and you've probably heard a lot of this on Twitter or heard it on CNN or whatever. I'm going to try very as clearly as I can to kind of explain how these 2 different ways could go. Again, understanding I'm a journalist, not a constitutional law expert or anything like that. This is just what I've been able to gather. The vice president and a majority of the cabinet could declare the president unfit. This is Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. So when you hear invoke the 25th Amendment, this is what they're talking about. This was designed for cases in which the president is incapacitated, like for a health reason, right? Or if he's been injured or is comatose or genuinely like insane or something like that. That's what it's designed for. It was not designed for this exactly, unless we say the president is just unstable and therefore unable to carry out his duties. Now, the way it would work is the vice president and a majority of the cabinet would sign a declaration. It's not clear whether acting secretaries are part of that. There are 3 cabinet level secretaries who are acting, who have never been approved by the Senate. So it's not clear whether they would have a vote or not. Whether the majority would require 8 out of the 15 cabinet secretaries or only 7 of the 12 permanent cabinet secretaries. It's complicated by the fact that Elaine Chao, the transportation secretary, has resigned. So exactly how many cabinet secretaries would be necessary is unclear. I think if they could get 10 of them or something like that, like you could kind of have a buffer so they have enough. The moment, this is my understanding, again, not a lawyer, but my understanding is the moment they sign the declaration, Mike Pence is acting president. President Trump is not removed from office exactly at that moment, but he no longer has the powers of the presidency. He has 4 days to respond, to declare himself fit. And if he does that, and the cabinet still says he's unfit, then Congress decides. Congress would adjudicate between the two sides. Congress would have 3 weeks to do that. Obviously, Joe Biden will be inaugurated in 13 days. So invoking the 25th Amendment would effectively end the Trump presidency, just signing the first declaration. Yes, Jen asked, doesn't Pence have to do it? That's what I've been saying. That it says the vice president and the cabinet have to form this majority of the vice president and the cabinet, sign a declaration. Then Mike Pence becomes acting president. Then there's a process that can go back and forth, but the term will end before that process happens. And during that entire process, Trump is not president. I mean, he's president, but he doesn't have powers. He doesn't have the powers of the presidency. So that's one way it could go. That could happen very quickly. And there are a lot of people calling for that to happen. Now, 24 hours ago, even in the midst of the whole thing yesterday, I would not have said that was possible. But just hearing the momentum today and the number of people calling for that to happen makes me feel like there's a little bit of momentum there. And that there continue to be reporting of conversations like that happening. These are all going to be behind the scenes conversations until they're not. Okay. I still don't think it's likely. I still think there's a less than 50% chance that will happen, but a higher chance than zero, which is not what I would have said yesterday. Patsy makes a good point, and I'm going to get to this. I'm going to talk through the whole impeachment scenario, and then we'll talk about why this happened. What would be the point of doing that right now? And Patsy's got part of it in the comments right now. Impeachment. I can't imagine impeachment actually getting done in a couple of days, but I guess it could be possible if Mitch McConnell is fully on board. Here's why. Nancy Pelosi has said, if the 25th Amendment is not invoked, we will impeach. Ilhan Omar, representative of Minnesota, has drafted articles of impeachment and has circulated them for co-sponsorship. Our own representative here in South Central Wisconsin, Mark Pocan, has signed on. I am not aware of what the rest of the Wisconsin delegation has done. I'm going to look into that later this evening. I'll see if Glenn Moore or Ron Kind, if those guys have signed on. I'm not sure if they have or not. The articles of impeachment could be approved very quickly. All the hearings that we saw earlier this year, January, February, are not entirely necessary. You could get it through the committee. You could get it approved very quickly. Then it goes to trial in the Senate, which would be presided over by John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The rules of that trial are determined by the Senate majority, I believe, which means that Mitch McConnell could say each side gets 37 hours of debate, and therefore it'll take 6 weeks to accomplish, therefore it won't actually happen. Or he could say, we're going to get this done in a day, if he really wants it to happen. Corey makes a good point here. I wish they wouldn't wait to see what happens on the 25th. The thing is, I don't disagree with you, and I think there's a lot of people who feel that way. And I think there's a lot of people who would say the impeachment has started already. Even though they haven't had hearings yet, they've got the articles written, they've got the articles circulating, they could start having hearings tomorrow. I think the way Pelosi did it was just to give the cabinet an opportunity, because the cabinet could do it much more quickly. The cabinet could get it done tonight, whereas the impeachment would take at least a few days. Right? Now, impeachment does not remove him. Oh, Margie answers one of my questions. Glenn Moore supports impeachment. Excellent. Thank you, Margie. Appreciate that. Jennifer asked, does impeachment remove him? Impeachment does not. He's already been impeached once. You got to get impeached in the House. Then you have a trial in the Senate. And if you're convicted in the Senate, you're removed. You're done. You're out. That entire thing, if they set up the rules right, they set up the hearing right, they set up the Senate rules correctly, it could happen in a couple of days. And then he would be removed from office. Mike Pence would be sworn in. So those are two ways that this could happen. And to be honest with you, both of those things could happen, right? Because the 25th Amendment doesn't actually remove you right away. Like, they could invoke the 25th Amendment tonight, make Mike Pence acting president, and then the House could impeach Donald Trump still. So what's the point? Why would they do this when there's only 13 days left? John Bolton's case is just grit our teeth and get through it. A couple of things that I would see as any proponents would see as the point. And as a journalist, I'm just explaining this to you. I'm not advocating for this necessarily. Okay. It would be exciting news to report, it would be just a big story, the biggest story, of today for sure. But I'm not hoping for it necessarily. I'm not advocating for it. I'm just reporting to you because a lot of people are talking about it. There is a possibility that I will say also, the president has been effectively deplatformed. Okay, one thing that this president in particular has done has used to do damage is Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, mostly Twitter, right? His complicity in the insurrection yesterday was that he prodded them to do it. Right? He incited them. He didn't lead them. He didn't lead the charge, but he used his pulpit. He used his rhetoric to incite the violence. And that's basically why people want him removed. That's like the action that is prompting this call for removal. Right? So, and that has been taken away from him for the most part. Because last night, even in saying on a Twitter video saying, everybody go home, please stop, he also said, we love you, you're very special, which is a very weird way to say that. But he was still praising them as patriots while also kind of half-heartedly telling them to stop, right? So he's taken off of Twitter, he's taken off Facebook. He doesn't have those mechanisms. And also, even though he's still president, if he tried to go live on TV right now, I would imagine most networks, other than maybe Fox News and Newsmax and OAN, like the mainstream news networks, probably wouldn't carry him live at this moment. Okay, so he doesn't have that bully pulpit that he usually has had before. So that's not the concern necessarily, I don't think. But what could he do? What he could do, he could technically start a nuclear war, although he's got the nuclear codes, but you still, to launch a nuclear attack is a big, long process that requires many people. The president can't do that unilaterally. Okay, so I'm not worried about that. He could start conflicts. He could order military around. He could issue legal orders still to attack Iran or something like that. Allison asks, did Twitter reinstate his account? I don't think they have yet. They suspended it for 12 hours. And if they've turned it back on, he hasn't used it. He hasn't tweeted at all today. So I assume that they've still got it locked down. But I'm not sure about that. But in any case, I don't think he's going to be on Twitter anytime soon. The other thing he could do now, while still president, everybody who stormed the Capitol yesterday is subject to charges of seditious conspiracy. That's a federal charge. They're also subject to federal trespassing charges, federal disorderly conduct charges, federal. They're subject to charges under a National Monuments Act signed by Trump, an executive order that Trump signed himself to protect national monuments. So they're subject to imprisonment under that statute. That's all. It's not statute, that order. That's all federal charges. Guess who Trump can pardon? Anyone subject to federal charges. If he, as long as he's in office, Trump could pardon everyone who was involved yesterday, including himself. Now, there's not a excuse me. There's the federal authorities have not ruled out charging Trump or charging Giuliani for whipping up the crowd yesterday morning, or Donald Trump Jr. They haven't said they're going to charge him, but they said they're looking into all options, which is obviously what law enforcement is going to say. I think it would be a bit of a stretch to actually charge Trump with a crime for what he said. However, there are other crimes, in the past that Trump could probably be charged with, and that he will face certainly state charges at some point for the financial problems. But he does have the opportunity still to pardon himself, although there's legal gray area there. But he could do it. He could issue himself a pardon, and then it would have to be litigated. But he could unquestionably, without any hesitation, without any litigation, pardon all of his children, pardon Rudy Giuliani, and pardon everybody who stormed the Capitol yesterday. Yes. A couple questions. Catherine asks, here's the thing about pardons. Catherine asks, can he pardon them if they have not been convicted by January 20th? You can be pardoned for crimes you have not even been charged with. That's what happened to Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was never actually charged with a crime. I mean, there were charges coming, and he knew that. But Gerald Ford pardoned him before they could even file charges. You could be pardoned for anything you did wrong for a certain period of time, whether or not you've actually been charged or convicted. So he could pardon everybody that was in the sedition yesterday, as long as he's in office. If he's removed, he no longer has that authority. If the 25th Amendment is invoked and Mike Pence is acting president, Trump could still issue the pardons, but they would be disputed, right? He could say, "I'm still president; I can still pardon you," but that would be subject to litigation as to whether people actually had been pardoned. And I would imagine, if the 25th Amendment were properly invoked, that those pardons would not hold up in court, and that those people could be prosecuted. So those are the reasons that people who are trying to do this would give for the reasons that they want to do it. Not only that, but it's just a message to send that the rest of the world is looking at us right now. And there's a question of whether how much we will tolerate this, whether or not there should be immediate and severe consequences, or if we just let it slide. You know what I mean? So I think there's a messaging argument to be made for removal of the president. Andrew asks, doesn't Trump get his Twitter back tonight? And couldn't he just go on Newsmax or something? Yes, he could definitely go on Newsmax or One American Network. Probably even Fox News would carry him live at this point. But that doesn't quite give him the same reach. It would get him to his base, but it wouldn't get him quite the same amount of reach. Lorraine mentions Steve Bannon. Do you think it's accurate that if a person is that Steve Bannon has not been pardoned, as far as I know, but he has been charged with all sorts of crimes, fraud crimes? Not Steve Bannon hasn't even been charged with anything related to the administration. Really, he's just been charged with fraud. But anyway, do you think it's accurate that if a person is pardoned, that he could be forced to testify and not have the Fifth Amendment to rely on? I am not a lawyer. I've heard that, and I think it's a compelling argument. I think it is. It is true that the Fifth Amendment is to prevent you from incriminating yourself. And if you've already been pardoned, you do not have incrimination to worry about, because you literally cannot incriminate yourself if you've been pardoned. No matter what you say, you can't be incriminated for the thing you've been pardoned for. So it is possible that if he pardons Giuliani, that Giuliani can be compelled to testify. Doesn't mean to tell the truth necessarily. Lorraine, you are a lawyer. I feel even better not knowing the answer to this question. But thank you for the question, Lorraine. It seems to me it does make sense that once you've been pardoned, you no longer have the protection of the Fifth Amendment, except that some of these crimes, some of these actions could be subject to state charges, and a presidential pardon only applies to federal charges. So that's a little bit of gray area there. So, but I appreciate the question, Lorraine. So let me see if there's any other questions here. If you have any other questions, drop them in here. But I'm trying to think what else has happened today. It's been a wild news day, just about all this. But it sounds like some of the people who came out and proudly announced their names yesterday are now starting to scrub their social media accounts. I was like, I don't know what you're thinking. The chief of the DC Metro Police said earlier today that they were watching the airport and they were going to try to nab some people before they left town. There were almost 50 people arrested yesterday, many of them just for being out after curfew. But it is true that sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. It's true that the FBI and other authorities are looking at social media. They're looking at the videos. They're looking at the photos that were taken. They're looking at media, journalist photos, as well as social media. And they have identified a lot of the perpetrators and are going to arrest them. And they're going to face federal charges. Like, they weren't arrested right there because of the DC Capitol Police were overwhelmed and weren't able to make a bunch of arrests. Speaking of that, the House of Representatives Sergeant at Arms has resigned. Chuck Schumer has requested the resignation, or has called for. He's not in a position to request it yet, but he has called for the Sergeant at Arms in the Senate to resign, and has said after January, later this month, when Chuck Schumer is majority leader, he will fire him, Sergeant at Arms in the Senate. And Nancy Pelosi has also called for the resignation of the chief of the DC Capitol Police. Now, there's several different police departments involved here. There's the Metro Police, which is like the city of Washington Police Department. And then there's the Capitol Police, just like we have in Madison. They have a Capitol Police that protects the Capitol and other state buildings. They have the U.S. Capitol Police, which protects the Capitol building and other federal buildings around Washington, D.C. I looked this up. The Capitol Police, the United States Capitol Police, has as many sworn officers as the city of Milwaukee. It's a big police force. And they were not at all prepared for what went down yesterday. Some would say they were complicit. They opened the gates and let people in. They literally opened gates to let people in because they couldn't hold them out anymore. So there's going to be some investigation, some questions. Excuse me. About the police response and about the responsibility of the Capitol Police and how everything went down and how close, how close the insurrectionists got to really do harm to the to members of the Congress, which could have been really disastrous. Had they been more than, they basically turned out to be rioting protesters. They were definitely, guilty of performing a seditious act and an attempted insurrection, but they weren't as well armed as they might have been. They didn't have bombs and that kind of stuff on them. But had they been more organized and not just a sort of a whipped up mob, it could have done real damage. It could have killed a lot of people in the government. It could have really brought the government to a halt. So there's something to answer to for the Capitol Police, I think, and there will be consequences for them for sure. So to recap, a lot of people are laying this at the feet of the president and his advisors, Giuliani and those guys who stood up and basically incited this mob, and who have been inciting this mob for a long time, right? They've been this. If the president had accepted the election results, this would not have happened, right? But he's been lying to people for 2 months about how this election was stolen from them, and he's been whipping them up for years, really. So there are calls today for the president to be removed from office. I think it is possible. I don't think it's likely. I think it is possible. If I didn't think it was possible, I wouldn't talk about it here. I'm not trying to grab onto sensationalist news or anything like that, or wild theories. This is not a wild theory. This is a definite possibility that this could happen. If it hasn't happened by tomorrow morning, it'll be impeachment. And if impeachment hasn't happened by Sunday or so, then it's not going to happen, right? But it's a definite possibility that something very, very big could be happening in the next day or two. So, any other questions, feel free to drop in the comments. We're going to take a short pause, come back with all the coronavirus news, which is what you really tune in for. I know, which is again not terrific news today at all. But we will be right back after this word from Madison College.
Online learning does not have to be scary. And Madison College was there for me.
We have people that are dedicated to our students' online success.
We can help you with your technology.
Give us the college try for 7 days. No risk, no worries. Madison College.
All right. COVID. It is, testing is getting better. Our narrative of the past, 3 weeks has been low testing. Yesterday we saw almost 10,000 tests processed. Today we saw over 10,000 tests, just barely, 10,148 COVID tests reported today, having been processed in the past couple of days. Of those, 3,791 were positive. That's the most we've had in a week. So that's not great. It's a 37% positive rate for the day. So that's not terrific. The positive test rates for 7 days, though, did not go up for the first time in a week. First time in like 10 days. They didn't go up. They didn't go down very much. They went of all people tested in the past 7 days, 31.9% tested positive. That was 32 yesterday, so it went down just a tiny bit. But the best news is it didn't go up because it's been going up. Of all tests, 11.4% were positive. That's the number that we really look at. That's what all the policy people look at. That one is down from 11.6 yesterday. So that's down also a tiny little bit, but at least it's down. At least it's not going up. That's the number we need to be below 3 before we can say we got this thing beat, right? Basically, right now, we're about 1 out of 9 tests were positive. We need it to be 1 out of 50. Okay? So that's still not good, but it leveled off for today at least. Gives us a tiny bit of sigh of relief. We did report 40 more deaths today, which is frankly fewer than I thought. So that's been kind of good. 95 2 days ago, 60 yesterday, 40 today. I really thought there would be more of a backlog. So I'm happy. I'm glad to hear there's only 40 deaths. That's a terrible thing to have to say. That puts our 7-day average for deaths at 31.4, which incidentally is about the same daily death toll of heart disease, which is the leading cause of death in Wisconsin. So still not great, not a good number, 31.4 deaths every day. But it's less than it was. That was over 60 at one point, not very long ago. So, okay, that's good. 13 of those deaths were in Dane County, which is one of the reasons I thought this would be a very high number today, because we get the Dane County numbers at about 9:30 in the morning. And usually they kind of mirror each other. Like if Dane County has big numbers, then the state has big numbers also. So I thought 13 deaths in Dane County. I thought, oh boy, it's going to be a bad day for the state. But I was wrong. That's good. Speaking of Dane County, I might have mentioned a couple of days ago that the Dane County numbers and the state numbers were off by a couple hundred. And we found out that was because there was a big outbreak out of prison in Dane County. We've pretty much surmised that it's either Oak Hill or the Oregon Correctional Facility because they're right next to each other. And that particular census tract has seen a big spike. So, but because that's a state facility, those cases went into the state data and didn't make it into the Dane County data for almost a week. So as a result of that, what we got is 753 new cases reported in Dane County today by Dane County. 403 of those are from that prison, which were actually confirmed back on December 28th and 29th, most of them. So late December, there's a huge outbreak in that prison. It goes into the state data, and the state data and the county data are now off. And then finally today, I guess, put into the state data. So it looks like today there was this massive outbreak across Dane County because there's 753 cases. Now, 403 of those actually were in that prison at the end of December, which leaves 350 other cases today in Dane County, which is like the highest Dane County's been in a while. And that's getting the Dane County 7-day averages pushing back up toward 200. Now, you'll recall when Dane County ordered schools closed, they said if we see 54 cases per day, when they first ordered schools, like high schools closed, that said you can still keep K through 2 open, or whatever it was. They said if we get to 54 cases per day, we'll close all the schools. And we're now at 200, and schools are opening again, which is just brilliant. I think that's just such a weird, nonsensical sequence of events, but whatever. So that is the COVID data for today. Oh, you know what? In all the confusion and all the staring at CNN to see if the president's going to get ousted, I forgot to check hospitalizations. Give me 1 second. Hospitalizations are going back down. This is a massive relief. Current COVID-19 hospitalizations in Wisconsin, 1,077. That's 51 fewer than yesterday. That's a massive relief to me because that number had been going down. It started to creep up for a couple of days, and now it's going back down again. Good. I'm happy about that. Okay. Thank you for the kind words, Margie and Corey. I really appreciate it. And it is a privilege to come on here every day and get you all up to speed on everything that's happening in the world. It is a wild time to be an American, and it is a wild time to be a journalist. And this coming on here to do this is kind of sometimes it's a little bit of cathartic for me just to get all this information that I get all day long to kind of put it together and give it to you and hear back from you and kind of have this dialogue is really it's been really really good for us. Now, speaking of that, starting next week and going forward, wait, what's next week? Either next week or the week after. I can't remember the dates now off the top of my head. We are going to have a couple of sponsors, new sponsors of this. We've had Madison College has been really supportive of this broadcast, and they're going to continue to advertise, I'm sure. But we're going to have a couple of new sponsors joining to support this particular broadcast, this daily update, and to sort of align their brands with ours, because we're obviously a trusted brand. You trust us, and so sponsors want to endorse that kind of relationship. And for that to continue, and as a nonprofit news outlet, I talked to you for months about donations, which you're still welcome to do, by the way. Madison365.org/donate if you have a few dollars to throw at us. But we also have these corporate sponsorship, corporate support. And what they want to see, what the sponsors want to see, they want to support what we do, and they want to know that what they're supporting gets to as many people as possible. So what you can do for us is to be our ambassadors, right? When you see these videos, share them with your Facebook, retweet it on Periscope, share the link from YouTube, and help us make sure that as many people as possible are watching this update, not only live, but after the fact as well. So anything you can do to share or endorse, get your Facebook friends to tune in and boost those viewership numbers. That helps the sponsors. That helps us get more sponsorship. That helps us continue to do this. Right? This is not I'm not trying to make a profit grab here. This is not a money grab, because we're a nonprofit, right? But all of this stuff costs money. It's I have to say the free press is not free, right? Like all everything here is it's not outlandishly large overhead costs, but we do have staff costs. And just to continue to do what we do, costs money. So even if whether you're able to donate or not, to directly support us that way, the indirect support you can do is to make sure that this show gets as many viewers as possible and reaches as many people as possible, because it's important. It's important information. Then also, it helps those sponsors out, and it helps us continue to land those sponsorships to get that corporate community support. So we appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Appreciate the kind words. You guys are very, very nice. And I really appreciate this community that we have, that we're building here. It's what community journalism is all about. This is not a one-way thing. This is not a me shooting information at you. This is dialogue back and forth, and I really appreciate that. So keep it up, everybody. It feels good. So with that, appreciate your time again. It's been a long one today, so have a wonderful evening. Stay tuned to Madison365.org. If anything big happens, I'll come back on here. But watch our Facebook, watch our Twitter. If there's any big, huge news, we will let you know. Thanks a lot. Have a wonderful evening. See you tomorrow.
This is 365 Media.